Ladies and gentlemen, boys and ghouls, gather yourself around the flickering radio dial and be amazed by the terrifying but true tales of the NFL trade deadline. Happy Halloween!
Oh my goodness. Let's hope the Vincent Price estate doesn't come for us. If they do, we will shift them head east to Zumwalt Manor in Connecticut. Dan Hanzus here. Heroes virtually. Marc Sessler, Gregg Rosenthal. It is indeed Happy Halloween. It is also the trade deadline in the NFL. And we have a bunch to talk about. What's going on, boys?
Good to be back with you. I just feel bad for that, kid at the Halloween parade this morning wearing a Montez Sweat Commanders jersey, like just a big L right off the bat.
He tried to get in. Yes, we are also mourning, and I guess it is Halloween, so mourning is part of the whole thing. Death, the death of Young and Sweaty, the Washington nickname that really I thought had some traction. Marc Sessler. There was even some fans at the Commanders game on Thursday night against the Bears that had posed for the photo and sent it to us, and it's just one more thing that disappears into dust, as we all will.
Yeah, I don't know if it quite hit the potential that we saw for it as a duo. And I guess, though, you'd have to look at it from another angle. Josh Harris coming in and saying, the branding of Young and Sweaty is too hot for this organization. We've got to totally dissemble the concept and scatter both of them to the seas.
It's funny because I thought you were going to say that the Washington Commanders didn't believe that Montez Sweat and Chase Young lived up to the potential of what they could be, which is certainly probably a fair statement. Young in particular, who came into the league as a potential, generational talent. But let's get into it. Let's start there because I think Washington's decision to not trade one but both of their talented young edge rushers tells you a little bit about where the Commanders are right now and where they're headed also is interesting. Let's start with Montez Sweat. He goes to the Chicago Bears in exchange for a second-round pick. This is a move that the Bears desperately need some more difference makers on that side of the ball. So they come out of this with one in Sweat, and then Chase Young, he is on the move to the San Francisco 49ers, who goes for a third-round compensation pick. So there is two big trades, and the Niners, obviously, true Super Bowl contender, add a big piece to the puzzle there.
Yeah, I'd love to go through all three teams and how it impacts it. But I'm going to start with the Bears because this was a curious trade, I think, to a lot of people. And I did find it compelling, interesting. A 2-6 team trading for a guy on the last year of his contract and trading, a high-quality pick. It's their second-round pick. So they're expecting that's going to be somewhere near the top of the second round. It's very similar to the Chase Claypool trade. And, for one, Montez Sweat, a much, much better player than Chase Claypool. So that should make Bears fans feel good. But I think it was a recognition that not just having a guy locked up long-term is valuable, but just control of their contracts is valuable. And I like the move for Chicago because it was what I talked about in the offseason, that I looked at their entire roster and I said, everyone's excited about DJ Moore. DJ Moore is a good player. And then I looked up and down the roster and I thought, DJ Moore might be the best player on their entire roster. And that was one of the reasons why I wanted to go under 7.5. I was like, if DJ Moore is the best player on your entire roster, that's not going anywhere unless you have a genius as a head coach, and they clearly don't. Montez Sweat, to me, is one of the most underrated pass rushers in the NFL. I've loved him. Really strong, long, an incredible first step. He's really got it all except for totally gaudy, sack numbers, but he's in the middle of his prime. I would say he's a top 15 to 20 at the most edge rusher in the entire NFL. He's very consistent year after year. He's gotten better and better. And Bears fans think, okay, that's great, but we only have him for 8 games. It's like, no, you are going to have him long term. You make this trade because you're ready to pay him whatever it costs, and you franchise tag him if not, and you've got a boatload of cap space. And people say, well, why not wait till he becomes a free agent, or why not sign the top free agent defensive end? The top free agent defensive end last year was Marcus Davenport. Like the year before that, it was Von Miller, who's 33 and was good at the time. I went back and looked at all the edge rushers, like maybe 1 or 2 pop up every 3 years in the middle of their primes. Those guys just don't get to free agency. So they've had a hard time getting good players onto their roster. They did it. I like the move for Ryan Poles and the Bears.
Well, I think that to hinge it off of the fact that they have control of the player and they'll get to know the player is absolutely right, because the idea that Montez Sweat would have ever picked the Bears in free agency is another unnecessary. We don't know that. That's a fill in the blank. I mean, the only thing I'd say from the Chicago side, because I think Jonathan Allen, the player, is like guaranteed or almost guaranteed to be as good as anything you get with that pick. Unless you got real lucky, and it could be a lot worse with what you might have gotten with that pick in the draft.
Sweat, yeah.
So there's that. Sweat, yeah. So they're like, well, I don't know. There's so many defensive linemen that Washington talked about moving that I'm like all over the place with this. But I think with Sweat, he automatically upgrades a defense that desperately needed pass rush. At the same time, this is a front office that has a lot of like up and down maneuvers. Like the Chase Claypool thing, we all get it. You gave a second for him a year ago, sold him for nothing. You also like tore down the defense and gave away Roquan Smith. And it's like, so I like that you're getting this player, but I find their like team building approach to be a little bit all over the place.
Well, yeah, I hear that. And until they start to show that they're making progress, it's fair to question the decision making. But I think it's okay for a team that's out of contention to make a big splash like this, because you do have to build. You got to get some dogs in that building, like Greg, you're saying, and this is a dog, and you have control over him, at least beyond you have the franchise tag here. So that makes sense, and I think it makes sense for everyone, because Washington had decided internally that I think what the expectation is that they were going to move one of these guys and then pay the other. But they made a decision to go in a different direction entirely for reasons that they don't have to share with people. But obviously, they're maybe not as high on Sweat's upside here. And they get a top 40 pick most likely out of it. I mean, it could be like the Chase Claypool pick, which was, I believe, 32. It could be, 33 to 36. I mean, this is a really high value pick. And let's move to the Chase Young move, because they send him to the Niners for that 3rd round pick. And that is a move, Greg, that the Niners, try to set aside the 3-game losing streak, but also maybe the timing, if you're going to have a 3-game losing streak, have it right before the deadline, so it really gives you a more clear-eyed view of your roster and what your flaws are and where you think you need to get better. So they go and they do get better, and I remember us talking before the season started that maybe that defensive line wasn't what it used to be under Saleh and even DeMeco Ryans. And now you add a guy that has, even though he's never truly met his expectations as a superstar type talent, he has that ability, especially playing across from Nick Bosa.
And next to Hargrave and Armstead and Kinlaw, and you're right, no one really stepped up in that other spot. They just signed Randy Gregory. He actually has played okay in the couple games they had him, but he was just a bit of an afterthought. They have Drake Jackson, Cleveland Farrell. And for the price, it's like, why wouldn't you? I'm a little surprised he could only get a compensatory 3rd round pick. This is a team in Washington, and we'll get to the Washington side of it, because they must have just decided we're trading him no matter what the offer is. Because a high 2nd for Sweat, okay, that's one thing. I'm a little surprised you don't want to keep him, but maybe they look at it like they have Daron Payne, they have Jonathan Allen, they already paid those guys a lot of money. It's defensive line. We don't want to put it all on the defensive line. Okay, you got a high 2nd. What's the point of a compensatory 3rd? That's the 100th pick in the draft. It's like, that's so low. Is it even worth it? And I think opponents are going to be thinking, how did we let the 49ers get away with it? Because Chase
GM
Young,
app.
Right.
GM app.
Chase Young.
Greg, just not to interrupt, but
please
to the point I was making there, it does kind of smell like there's maybe more to it, but maybe the relationship or what they believe or the upside, or internally what kind of player they think that the guy is, what kind of locker room presence is. I think there seems to be more to it to make this move now.
Sure, but
yeah,
he's like only been there. Like, you're only going to have him for 8 more games. I think there had been questions about his approach to the game, and he's been extremely up and down. He was the defensive rookie of the year, good rookie season, has been injured and disappointing when he's played the last 2 years. But this year he's top 10 in the league in pressures, Mark. Like he's top 20 in PFF's pass rush grade. He's incredibly productive. In one more game, he will have more pressures this season than even had during his defensive rookie of the year season. And I know he's like not as subtle and not as complete as a guy like Joey Bosa or Nick Bosa, but who cares? He's your number 2 pass rusher, and he's been incredibly productive this year. He's a great case for like, I'm in a contract year. My career is in the balance. I'm going to put it together and have a much better season. And he has so far.
I think it's the Niners are a team that if they only have him for 9 games, that's the right team to go do this. And, they already had 2 third-round comp picks because of Rand Carthon taking over the GM job in Tennessee and DeMeco Ryans going to Houston. So this was essentially highway robbery.
Yeah.
I mean, this is a classic what good teams do. And, there's incredible upside to him. And if it doesn't work out, like they'll find a way to reload in the offseason as they always do. And I think, they saw Seattle make a big move yesterday. Seattle suddenly sitting on top of the division. It's like, we're not going to be left outside in the rain.
There's a health component to Chase Young as well. He suffered a really bad knee injury in 2021 where he tore his ACL, but also ruptured his patellar tendon, which is one of the more serious knee injuries a football player can have in terms of that area of the body. So if you're Washington, I'm sure, that plays a factor as well in terms of his durability going down the line. And then for San Francisco, yes, they have Bosa, and he is one of the best ends in the league, but their other non-Bosa defensive ends, Cleveland Farrell, who's gotten talked up as having a bounce-back season, but come on, Drake Jackson, Kerry Hyder Jr., and Randy Gregory. Of that group, Farrell has the best pass rush win rate at 17%, and that all 4 of those guys have combined, this is from ESPN, for 5.5 sacks and 22 pressures. So there was a void there, and if he does play his butt off here and play at a high level, and Bosa, maybe the numbers aren't there, but he's still getting to the quarterback himself, and the sacks will come, that could be like a Jenga piece that falls into place for this team.
It's crazy. I bet he actually will make it to free agency. I said that the Bears made the Sweat move because I don't think players like that get to free agency, and so I thought it was a creative way to get him onto your team. Young has a pretty good chance because I just think he's going to be set up for success. Everyone shows up there and has success because of their defensive line coach and the system that they run. And I just don't think San Francisco is going to be in the position to maybe pay market value because it's going to be suddenly really, really high. I just was a little surprised the Commanders were so just eager to get rid of these guys because they have all the cap space in the world. And you've seen a lot of new ownership, Mark, in Cleveland, or when Jimmy Haslam got there and new GMs and whatnot. And we've all seen it. Like, doesn't this just scream of like the owner came in and told Ron Rivera, it's like, whatever you do, you just got to go get some picks. I don't care if it's going to make you worse. I don't care if you don't want to do it. Just trade them and get whatever you can. Because what's the point of the 100th pick in the draft? I barely see a point to it.
I totally agree. I think Josh Harris is going to be seen as a very active owner. I mean, he was involved with the Sixers. You guys know more about that than I do. But
they traded James Harden last night. I mean, night. What of 24 hours? I
think if anything, like you have to look at like what are the fingerprints, the most, jarring, noticeable fingerprints of Ron Rivera was this defensive line. It was like he went out of his way to not go get the quarterback year after year. And it's like this was Ron Rivera's vision, and it's being taken apart piece by piece. And I think Ron Rivera is probably seen inside the organization as someone that did so much in a really tough time. But ownership changes, trigger coaching changes, and like what has Ron Rivera done to make an argument for himself? I think this is the argument. We're not into this vision. That I just feel like it's he's got to be realizing it's the end of an era, and I think he probably knew that going into the season.
Yeah, he's history. He gone. He gone indeed.
Well, unless he does the Ron Rivera thing and like wins 5 games against bad teams at the end of the season, and they get like the 7th seed to go 9-8.
But you're also like what you're saying about the owner is so hot in the pants to just have all these draft picks and to start the team over in his own vision. I would imagine that would come with a coaching change. But Rivera does have sway internally. It feels like he seems to be respected. We'll see. But I would be very surprised I know even with the quarterback, Sam Howell, and he's coming off a great game, I still stand by what I thought over the summer, that next year you're going to have a new head coach and a new quarterback in Washington. We'll see. They're obviously making moves. Also making moves, the Vikings. We talked about what are they going to do. They reeled off 3 wins in a row. They're in a very middling conference where there are a couple superpowers and then a whole bunch of meh. What are they going to do with Kirk Cousins out for the year? Are they going to try to trade and give up high-value pick to try to get another quarterback that can make them a playoff contender? Do they do nothing and just develop the young guy in the building, Jared Hall? Well, they decide to kind of thread that needle, and they pick up Josh Dobbs, who earlier this season, before the season started, was traded from the Browns to the Cardinals, had some success in Arizona before being benched ahead of this weekend's games, and now they send him to Minnesota. Dobbs on his 3rd team in like 3 months for a 6th-round pick. I think there's reporting out there that Hall, the 5th-round pick rookie, will be starting this week against the Browns, I believe.
Atlanta, I'm
sorry. And but Dobbs makes sense as a guy once he gets a little more comfortable, can take things over if the rookie can't play the guitar.
I think if we've seen something about Josh Dobbs in all these stops, pulled into Tennessee at the 11th hour, looked competent, didn't need 2 months to pick up the offense. They just trust him to do it. It was not spectacular. It's just Josh Dobbs. Same thing with Arizona, looked competent. I mean, the one little spicy element that he adds, he's ranked out as PFF's number 3 quarterback on the ground. And he looked like it. I mean, he added a lot to that part of their offense. And so I think if you're a coaching staff, it's like you could have maybe thought about Jameis Winston. There were a couple little options, flavorless options out there. Dobbs has been playing. He's been active. It's like maybe they just found it to be the most kind of, it's the middle of the road option, but it's like this guy's proven that he can come in and not embarrass you.
It's uncreative is what it is. He's literally the guy every team goes for when you need a starter next week. It's happened 3 times in a row. I mean, it worked for Tennessee, and we had barely ever heard of Josh Dobbs at that point. He was like the 4th-string quarterback at one point in Cleveland and worked his way up. And it worked in Tennessee. It essentially worked in Arizona as well as it could have. And now they do it again. Hearing Kevin O'Connell talk about him, I think he was like a longtime fan. He sees the athleticism. He thinks he's really smart and that he can kind of pick up the scheme, and it gives this team, I believe, a much better chance to make the playoffs. So they did what I was asking, Dan, and they didn't have to give up anything for it. It was a 6th for a 7th swap. That was sort of my point.
That was what I was asking too.
Right.
I said you can go get somebody.
Yes.
But because you're kind of internally in mourning, don't give up a 2nd-round pick or something to bring in Ryan Tannehill. Because with this current roster, what are you trying to do? This is kind of, I think, the sensible move. You give up a day 3 pick, you get a day 3 pick back, you get somebody in here. It's not going to embarrass you if he ends up playing, and you just work your way through a season that, let's face it, was cursed and undone by a brutal injury. Now, could Dobbs get hot and with a good supporting cast and Justin Jefferson gets healthy? Could they sneak in the back door of the playoffs? Sure. It's a weird conference. So, yeah, I think kind of everybody wins here.
Are they there right now? I'm going to go look.
They got to be. They got to be at 500.
They are the 7th seed because they have the tiebreak right now over New Orleans. Behind them is the other losing South teams and the Rams and the Commanders. I mean, they have a real shot. And Kevin O'Connell, we have him actually. He talked today about that. He would plan to start Jaren Hall this week. But he sort of left the door open and also spoke very highly of Dobbs and made me think that Jaren Hall is going to have a pretty high bar to clear to keep that job if he does start.
I know he's excited to get going here. So we'll get him out here and start the preparation of acclimating him and getting him ready to go, potentially on Sunday, in a supportive role of Jaren. We do plan to start Jaren Hall on Sunday. But as we work through the week, we'll keep you guys posted on that. Excited to see what Jaren can do.
Left it open a little bit. By the way, did you happen to check out my Twitter account last night? Probably not, Dan.
Your personal Twitter account?
Well, just it might.
I'll see tweets. I doubt you will. but I didn't kind of
that you
scroll
were
through
too
it.
on top of it. When I saw this news, because it had come out from our guys that Dobbs wasn't going to start for the Cardinals this week, that it was going to be either Clayton Tune, who is expected to start according to Rap Sheet, or Kyler Murray if he's ready to go. And I quickly just tweeted out,
I did see this, by the way.
QB1, Dobbs QB1 ? And we just had this big conversation of, there can only be one insider at every organization you're at. So I just want to know if you're feeling the heat.
Oh.
Gregg Rosenthal. Greggy in the morning.
Can I just ask a question on Dan's behalf? Does an insider put out information with a question mark at the end?
Hey,
Well,
sometimes you can't burn your sources.
There's so many things wrong about what just happened.
I think they're right. I think they're right, and I think they're beautiful.
No, I don't even have to say get off my corner because you're not even in my town. But keep working at it. You got a triple source for starters. Mark's right. You never ever use a question mark in your reporting. You don't make it in something that's up for interpretation. You give the people the info they need. Like when I had that expose on the breakdown of the relationship between Ian Rappaport and Tom Pelissero and the insiders' internal war going on, that came from digging and then getting real answers from a third party that's boots on the ground. I mean, that's what it's about.
Wait a minute.
I mean, you got to admit, Greggy in the morning has just a certain ring to it.
I mean, maybe Greggy on overnights. Maybe we'll be open to that.
I don't like this development
Greggy
at all.
on the graveyard shift. Mark, how about your theme?
Oh, I'll be preparing one for our next show, I'm sure.
I mean, you can imagine the hours and hours of production that went into the.
Well, that I respect, Greg. The fact that you worked on that behind the scenes, that you definitely have my respect for that, and also you're again wearing the Jerry from Succession T-shirt. That also.
You little slime puppy. Yeah, that's right.
That also checks boxes for me. Let's take a break and then finish the news and TNF preview. All right, some more trades. Yes, the trade deadline about 25 minutes ago came and went. And while we don't have a quarterback or a high-profile wide receiver, poor Devontae Adams is still stuck in the desert. There are players on the move, like cornerback Rasul Douglas, who is traded from the fading Packers to the Bills. So a third-round pick goes to Green Bay, and a fifth-round pick goes back to the Packers. And that adds some depth for the Bills who could use that as well.
It's really been notable the last few weeks when Kyer Elam, their first-round pick from a year ago, is a healthy scratch. Like, they can't even get him on the field. He was their first-round pick, and you lost Tre'Davious White for the season. And you have this kid, Benford, who was taken, I think, in the sixth round of that same draft, who's actually played pretty well. But that's it. Like, they gave Teron Johnson, who's their slot corner, a lot of money, and he's, to my amateurish eyes, has been getting cooked every week. And then the other side, they really don't have anyone. So Rasul Douglas was one of those Packers that was getting increasingly frustrated in press conference settings of just like what a mess this is, and maybe that the offense was a little bit of a mess. And they're like, okay, let's get this guy out of here.
I also feel like every time
he wasn't a culture fit.
I guess.
Yeah,
not.
I mean but you're right, because he was like openly speaking about not being a culture fit, I think, and so he gets his wish. But I feel like every time we'd watch like primetime Packers games last couple of years, like Rasul Douglas is making a huge play. He's got 10 picks over the last couple seasons, 2 pick sixes, 2 that clinch games. He kind of is a really interesting fit for the Bills. They needed him. There is, though, an interesting video out there that I just saw seconds before we did the show where Josh Allen, they're playing the Packers, gets into it with Rasul Douglas and basically says, you suck. And so there's going to, he's got to have to go fit that culture now. They're going to have to work on that.
You have been deemed a culture misfit. Here's an interesting trade. The Browns, they say goodbye to Donovan Peoples-Jones, who had, by the way, this surprised me, nearly 900 yards receiving last year for Cleveland, but in the Deshaun Watson era now, had not really found a role or much production. But he goes to the Lions, and the Lions send back a 6th-round pick. So on the surface, it's like, Donovan Peoples-Jones, he's a guy, and you get that back a day 3 pick, and like that's whatever. But we just happen to watch the Lions, and we just heard some boo birds out for Jameson Williams, and the former 1st-round pick, Mark, has not clicked. He's had a suspension for gambling. He had the knee injury. And you just wonder if this kind of says something about Detroit's patience with a player they invested so much in just last spring.
I think it's a combination of that development. Marvin Jones, who was one of their bigger wideouts, walked away from football for a period of time. They don't have him on the roster. So Donovan Peoples-Jones, he's sort of been such a hot and cold producer. Like you said, he had almost 900 yards a year ago. This year, I think he seems to, it's funny because Ben Johnson, the Lions OC, called him like a high-quality player and like a good teammate, and so he must have some relationship with him. But on the Browns coaching staff seemed to go real hot and cold with him. He had 97 yards on 8 catches this season when they could use wideout help in general. That's off of 205 routes. So I think there's part of not working with Deshaun Watson, not working with the other quarterback chaos they have there. So it's a better landing spot. I think he's a guy. He's just sort of like your third or fourth guy.
Right. But Jameson Williams, I guess I want to see. He'll be an interesting guy. Track his snaps as Peoples-Jones gets ramped up with that team. Finally. Ooh, a little AFC South guard talk. Ezra Cleveland, the guard, comes over from the Vikings in exchange for a day 3 pick. And I wish we can go out on something a little stronger than that. But listen, having players that you can add as depth pieces or potential starters on your internal line surrounding the pivot, that matters in pro football.
He's one of those guys that they were always threatening to maybe bench, or people who watch the games didn't love him, but then PFF would have him super high. He's always ranked in the top 20 of PFF. So the Jaguars, big PFF fans, they had just signed Dalton Reisner, so they could get rid of him. I was almost surprised the Jets didn't make a move like this, maybe, because Cleveland's, if nothing else, he's played a lot, and he's young. There was also a report, by the way, the Jaguars and the Patriots were talking, I think this was from Albert Breer, were talking Josh Uche, but they disagreed over either 4th or 5th round pick compensation, and so it just didn't happen. So at that point, just give them the 4th or give them away. What are we even doing here? I don't know. Just once you're that close, just do it. What does it matter?
They were they were targeted as a pretty solid bet to go get defense help on the defensive front. So I'm with you. What is the difference between those 2 picks? This helps their offensive line. They've had some injuries and they've been banged up a little bit, but Cleveland plays guard, he plays tackle. He's been a better run blocker than pass blocker, except this has been his best year pass blocking. So, and that's, of course, according to PFF. I'm not saying that that's me breaking down his run and pass blocking snaps, but helps them out.
The Jets lost their starter and backup center to the IR in consecutive quarters this week. And I don't, in general, even though it's been a positive season, the jury for me is out on Robert Saleh and what certain elements of the way he approaches things and his game management, and even the way some of the things he says to the media. They asked him about it, as you would think, hey, you guys going to try to make a trade to get some help on the interior line? And he just dismissed it out of hand. Hey, if there were any good players out there, we would try to get them, but there's no teams that are going to be trading, good offensive linemen this time of year. It's Rob, we don't always have to talk so much. Let's let Trader Joe see if he could find an Ezra Cleveland. Now, maybe they didn't like Ezra Cleveland internally, but sometimes I just wish Rob would kind of pipe down a little bit. Separate conversation.
Part of being the New York coach. Although I like that. I don't think he tries too hard to be something he's not. Sometimes he tries hard. It's like when he's saying like if they hate and you not pop it. I mean that's trying hard.
Right.
But that's just who he is. I think so. At least I think you get in trouble, especially in New York, but anywhere where you're trying to be like a little phony, you're trying to be a tough guy when you're not a tough guy. I think he is who he is. So I respect that at least.
I liked him. He puffed out his chest after the Eagles game and said, we've faced all these great quarterbacks and we embarrassed them all. And it's like, well, Dak Prescott carved you up in week 2. I guess we're just not counting certain quarterbacks. It's just like sometimes I think he gets a little carried away.
Yes.
But Dan, one little note, like this Jets Magic carpet ride that I keep trying to sell you on.
Yes.
One of the great, like when they, create that 3 or 4 hour, 8-part documentary about this Jets team. One of the features will be that they got to the playoffs with like an 8th string center. So that's just something that, embrace that.
And
I guess part of me sour because I think Salah's part of it. Like the Jets should have absolutely traded for a quarterback weeks ago, but even today, and they are just going to continue to talk themselves into Zach Wilson, and that I believe will be their undoing this season. But that's just the way it goes.
I wouldn't call this breaking Jets news, but I do think it's worthy of mentioning and discussing. 2 minutes ago, General Manager Joe Douglas said at the podium, talking about Aaron Rodgers potentially coming back this season, quote, "We're expecting Aaron to be back."
Whoa.
It's pretty bold.
Hello.
Now when he says that, I hope there's a follow-up, like, is that regular season or postseason? Because that's the first time a Jets official, everything had been coming out of the Rodgers camp to this point. And by the way, Aaron Rodgers runs the Jets, so everything kind of filters through him anyway, but I'm just curious if they clarified that.
I mean, the timeline, if you think of when Cam Akers returned, which was very quick, and he was not the same Cam Akers, but he did come back. I got to check. I think it was maybe under 5 months. Terrell Suggs was about 5 months. And then Akers, played in that Super Bowl run, and he, played really poorly, but he did play. Even that would put them, at the playoffs if it was like 4.5 months.
He tore it. I'll never forget it. It was September 11th that evening. So we're talking.
That's the end of January.
We're coming up. We're not even 2 months.
Okay, so they did follow up, and he just said he has no predictions. But you just did have a prediction. You said you expect him to be back. I guess that's an expectation.
I mean, maybe the general manager also needs to speak a little less. Why don't you say that?
He doesn't speak at all, actually. This is his one press conference he does. Now, rap sheet, Douglas clarified that he meant, quote, with the team. He's leaving the rest up to the doctors. Okay, enough.
All gas?
All right, let's...
That was a tough sitch for Gregg's media insider run right there.
I mean, I'm just reading off the most trusted insiders in the game. You want to take...
Oh, that's how you do your reporting?
You want to take a shot at Rap Sheet and Zach Rosenblatt? Go after it. I trust Zach and Ian.
I think, Mark, it was important that you pointed that out. All right, let's talk Thursday night.
Gregg Rosenthal. Gregg. Greggy in the morning.
The gong at the end.
The gong. Well, the dolphin also is just elite. All right, Thursday night football. And that's it. That's the trade deadline.
Yeah. We got something. I was hoping
give it a B-.
It wouldn't be a dud. We got stuff.
B-. How about a title for this podcast? This B-, the 2023 NFL trade deadline.
I think it's very fair.
They gave us Leonard Williams for that show yesterday too. I'm happy with them. I'm happy with the
Greggy.
football gods. I'm taking it. B.
No, that's too much. It's an 81 out of 100.
I mean, young and sweaty. They broke up young and sweaty.
Well, that saved it from being, a gentleman's F maybe. We needed that.
Right. They also kept Jalen Johnson, by the way. That was a very short-lived story, but one of the top-ranked cornerbacks in the league, according to PFF, having a nice contract year. They let him seek a trade, Jalen Johnson out in Chicago, but they never found a deal out there, and it did not happen.
This go seek your own trade thing, it seems like it takes a really long time, and it seems like they're not very good at it typically.
It seems like a bit of a trick. It's like, we're not going to trade you. Go find your own trade. And then they're like, nah, we're not doing that.
Yeah.
Like
16 hours before, go find that long-term contract.
It's
no one's ready
sending
for that.
your dog into the backyard so he could go chase his own tail for a while. All right.
Mission accomplished.
let's head to we'll get to Mike in a little bit. Week 9, here we go. This is it. This is the true midpoint of the season. 4 teams on bye: Broncos, Lions, Niners, Jaguars. It all starts Thursday night in Pittsburgh, where the 4-3 Steelers, they know it. They know if Marc Sessler's 12-win prediction is to come true, they are running out of L's, and they're coming off a tough home loss to the Jags. And now they get the Titans, a team that's winless on the road this year, Mark. However, Will Levis, and I was tweeting a bit with our bud, the gravedigger, Justin Graver, who's in Texas for the World Series with Fox right now. And I said, man, there's now real juice to your season, which I'm sure is great for his podcast and everything. He's going to play again, Will Levis, after throwing 4 touchdown passes. Ryan Tannehill is working his way back from that ankle. So you get Levis with a big, tough assignment here on the road against the Pittsburgh Steelers. That's pretty nice.
Yeah, I think we're gaining, evidence on who Will Levis is. Like the opening chapter of that was jaw-dropping. I went and watched that game again today, and it's like, I don't think it's crazy to think that the Titans went from being, surefire sellers to like, hang on here. Everything suddenly changed in this game, and it's going to be that Falcons defense is not a joke. And what I loved about watching Will Levis and what I loved about the Titans coaching staff was like, let's just go let him unfurl some of the most insane passes we've seen this season. He played with total confidence. He's up at the line, making adjustments and checks. And it's like, I know DeAndre Hopkins had some other good games this season too, but this offense was an eyesore and impossible to watch. And suddenly he completely helps DeAndre Hopkins morph into what we always thought he could be. And like the connection right there. I mean, there's a couple throws where it's like, the first touchdown where DeAndre Hopkins sort of dozy-doze with A.J. Terrell, that was a little strange. But then, tears away, and it's just like, it's DeAndre Hopkins. Just rip the ball to him and have trust that it's going to work out. This stuff was not happening with Tannehill, and I really like Tannehill overall as a career person, but like you could feel the energy change and everything change. And it's like the way I saw this game, 10 days ago was like potential snooze fest, especially when you factor in the Steelers offense. But now it's like, yes, I'm going to be watching this. Yes, I know exactly who interests me the most. And this team has changed before our eyes in the last, 80, 90 hours.
And yes, Derrick Henry also remains a member of the Tennessee Titans with the trade deadline having passed.
Good point. And Nuke. And I loved in the first quarter of that game, like he was getting to his second reads, even on a play where they didn't pick up the first down and they ended up punting. It just like looked like a pro play. There was a beautiful throw to Treylon Burks that the defender broke up at the last second. Burks, struggles to get, it seems to struggle in general, I would say. But that was a play where DeAndre Hopkins was the primary receiver, and you could see Levis look at him, and Hopkins fell. And then Levis has this gear where it's like, oh, okay, are my primary receivers out? Why don't I go throw the ball 55 yards down the field on a dime? And so I don't know how this can last. Like, we'll see. It is just one game, and we've been fooled before, but man, it was an intriguing first step, and it's a tough matchup in terms of the Steelers pass rush. We know that. But the Titans offensive line has been closer to average this year. It hasn't been the tire fire. You saw Will Levis get protected pretty well actually on Sunday, and it's not a tough matchup throwing on these Steelers cornerbacks. Pat Peterson getting cooked week after week. He's benched sometimes, he's not other times. Chandon Sullivan's they're out there, and he's getting cooked quite a bit. Like they give up a lot of yards through the air, so it could be another fun Levis game.
No Minkah Fitzpatrick. That's a huge factor right there.
There was a point in the game, the Titans game, where it was either James Lofton or maybe Jay Feely pipes about Levis, and he's doing this against a top 10 defense. It's like, all right, first of all, let's seriously calm down about the Falcons, like talking them up like, they're some type of elite defense.
No, they're
but
average.
even if there is reasons to say, oh, there are things to exploit here, putting him on the road in Pittsburgh in a primetime game, and that's one of the reasons T.J. Watt is in that conversation of the greatest defensive players in football. Is like that guy, he will make an impact play in that game. I mean, maybe 2, maybe 3. He raises his game, and like if Levis goes in there and shreds the Steelers, like, we have a major development in the NFL to talk about on Thursday night, or I should say you have to talk about, Greggy, with your guest to be named later.
Yeah, I'm excited about it. And it's a good Steelers defense. I think they're 9th in DVOA. That feels about right. Better against the pass. They're average against the run, so you'd like to see Henry and Tajay Spears. And the Steelers offense, after one promising week against the Rams, kind of went back to what they do. I actually thought Pickett played well before he got hurt, even though he didn't quite have the production. There were a few big-time drops. He didn't make any bad decisions, some bad protection, but that's endemic of this offense, that they're not playing well. And it does sound like we have Kenny Pickett. He spoke on Tuesday. Let's hear from him.
It's frustrating. It's part of the game, though. I've been doing it for a little bit. It is what it is. You just got to be available and get ready to go on Thursday night.
Kenny, is you playing Thursday conducive to how you feel, or are there clearances you need from doctors, or is it a bit of both?
No, I'm playing for sure.
And what he, I think what he's answering initially there is he's been, banged up this year. It feels like every couple of shows we're talking about a Pickett injury and wondering how serious it might be. So he's expressing frustration there, but he wants to be on the field. And quite frankly, I get it. He hasn't played well enough to kind of secure himself as the QB1. He doesn't want Trubisky to go in there again in an island game and have some success, and then all of a sudden Mike Tomlin's answering hard questions and having to make decisions. So Pickett's like, nah, keep me in the lineup. Let me get this thing figured out.
Yeah, I think also, like, there's if I like this about Kenny Pickett is, like, you could question, like, is this going to be a pattern, the durability? Because there's been a number of different things, but he kind of fights to get back in there, and I think that resonates with a Steelers team that needs some consistency on offense. Like, I want to see faster starts, especially like in an island game at home on a Thursday night. I don't love the matchup against Tennessee's defense, but last week against Jacksonville, a good defense, like, first 4 drives went for 9 yards. Then they stall at the Jacksonville 5,
Spicy.
Squeeze out a field goal, and then they close the half by missing a field goal. It's like they're not well coached. We know that. They're not sexy. You can't have Deontay Johnson like not helping your young quarterback out with a bunch of drops and other nonsense. So it's like, when do we get a complete game from this team? Like once every 4 weeks.
Right, and let's not bang our heads against the wall trying to run Najee Harris or Jalen Warren for that matter. Titans second against the run according to DVOA, and 25th against the pass. So it sets up as like a day you need some Pickett. Yeah, and you're right. You don't want Trubisky coming in there. That's the MVP, the Nickelodeon most whatever you call it. I don't know.
MVP. All right.
You don't remember the MVP, Mark? It was a magical moment when
Does he get slimed or something?
The fans around America could vote. I believe it was even a playoff game, and I believe they lost it. But the fans at home voted Trubisky MVP kind of as a joke, and he won. They just had to give him the award. The fans.
Whenever the entire nation can band together for ironical humor, that's unusual. So I can see value in that.
Thank you for bringing it up, because it brings back one of my favorite media stories in the history of the world and civilization. Is that People Magazine have their annual 50 Most Beautiful People edition. I don't know if that still exists. It might. Who knows? That feels like something could have been wiped.
We're all beautiful
for
now.
various reasons. Yeah, but like they, that was a big deal. And then the person, or is it sexiest people? Whatever it was like, and then somebody would get the cover. It's like the sexiest man alive, JFK Jr. or whatever. So this particular year was about 1995. They sent a photographer to the Kansas City Chiefs training camp because it had been deemed that Rich Gannon would be one of the most beautiful people for 1995. Rich Gannon is a very attractive man. I believe it was. Let me just make sure I have this right.
I gotta admit, I never thought about it before. I mean, I guess a younger Rich Gannon, I can't argue with it, but it's a little surprising. He was the MVP, I suppose, of the NFL. That's pretty good.
Okay. So, yes, it was Rich Gannon. This is a story that was relayed by Jeff Pearlman, who was like connected in this world at some point. Anyway, it was the sexiest athlete of 1998. So they send the photographer to take a photo of Rich Gannon at camp, but the photographer, through some type of mix-up, asks like, okay, I just got to get a quarterback photo or whatever. And instead they shoot Elvis Gerbach, who is a very nice man, it seems, but you could look it up. Elvis Gerbach is kind of an everyman, doesn't stand out as an overly handsome gentleman. And when they realized their error, they didn't go back. They said, we can't now like tell Elvis we shot the wrong guy. So they just rolled with Elvis Gerbach as the sexiest athlete of 1998, and the photo of him is like him in the locker with his leg up in a pair of like 90s blue jeans and like a big hairy barefoot. And that is what I thought of when you told that
That's
story.
incredible.
So that's a great story to end. I was gonna say end our week because it feels like we've done a week's worth of shows, but no, we'll just say goodbye for 48 hours here, and we'll be back with our preview.
We will, and it is Halloween, and everybody, all the parents listening, have a great time with the kids. I will be on the road with the children, and as a way of signing off for this very spooky edition of the NFL trade deadline. Around the NFL episode, Mike McDaniel has been a popular costume this year for that matching gray sweatsuit that he wears, and a very distinct look with the hard part of his hair and the glasses and the headset. It's perfect, I would imagine, especially in the Miami-Dade County era. So you're seeing that costume out there, including something that went viral of a little child as Mike McDaniel, perfect with the run after the halftime interview. If we have that, let it rip, Eric, behind the virtual glass.
With his team as well. Miami 17.
That's why you got to watch YouTube if you haven't seen this.
The second half, the halftime.
Look at the spread.
Hustle in there.
He even had the watch. I don't know if you noticed that, like the
It's
fake
a nice
Rolex.
watch to put on a kid.
Did a great job.
They're
I
not
don't
sending
think
him
it
to
was
school.
probably
with
not
that.
real, Greggy. But
Okay, that's a fair point. They can
could be a
figure
rich
they see
kid.
that.
Could be a rich kid.
Yeah,
McDaniel
I
is
like
not
that
even
sweatshirt.
sneaky fast. He just is fast.
He's fast. He's
Who?
quick. McDaniel.
Oh, all right. Oh, because in that run, yeah, he seemed like
in
he
that
moved
clip.
pretty
I mean,
good.
the kid is too, but like McDaniel has like
well,
some real
don't forget,
acceleration.
he was a college wide receiver.
Yeah, I know, but that wasn't yesterday. Like he's maintained his speed. I don't feel like I went quite as fast as I was in college.
He probably
in some
hasn't
ways.
maintained the speed, but he probably moves much better than a typical 36-year-old or whatever. Here's McDaniel.
Right, nothing special then. Well,
Here's McDaniel on being a popular costume this Halloween.
I've seen it posted on social media, kids dressing up as Mike McDaniel.
That does not compute. That doesn't make any sense.
I have the video if you want to see it.
They did your run on Sunday Night Football.
One kid did the run, and then a fan last night.
Was it faster than the
So
kid?
I'm just curious, what, as you say, goes into dressing up like Mike McDaniel?
I have no idea. This is. I refuse to accept that as reality.
But I guess the knapsack would be essential, or what do you, the glasses, the
capris.
Probably the essential would be the broad chest, right?
Oh my God.
That's you're doing a Mike McDaniel.
Oh my God. That is exactly, Mark, how Greg would answer that question.
the broad chest. Yes,
Yeah.
absolutely.
That
invisible
does not
string.
compute. I do not accept that as an answer. I love him.
We have to, Eric behind the glass, we need to get Mike McDaniel on our show this offseason. Any means necessary.
Owners meetings. Let's go back. Remember when we
he'd
used to
fit
do
right
that?
in.
That was fun.
All right, that's it. We'll be back on Thursday with the preview edition of Week 9 and the draft and the Germany game, the first ever game from Frankfurt, Germany. How about that? And it's a dandy.
Shout out to Jeremy Bergen, by the way. Feel better.
Yes.
Thinking of you, bro.
We love you,
Yeah,
bud.
buddy. Get well soon. See you back at the office, hopefully. Heed the call.